Alrighty, everybody, welcome to the Sunday Archive speaker meeting. My name is Nick. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Nick.
Can we please have a moment of silence for the alcoholic who still suffers, followed by the serenity prayer. God,
Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
We ask that you please take a moment to silence your cell phones out of respect for your fellows. And we will now pass the basket in honor of the seventh tradition. Welcome to the Racine AA Archives speaker meeting. Our purpose is to document permanently the work of Alcoholics Anonymous, to make the history of the organization accessible to AA members and other researchers, and to provide a context for understanding AA's progression, principles, and traditions. We meet here at the Grove Club the last Sunday of every month. The first half of the meeting will be a Q&A period followed by a break. And after the break, our speaker will resume sharing their experience, strength, and hope pertaining to a chosen page from the Big Book. This meeting will be recorded and stored at the Racine Area Central Office, and a digital copy will be sent to Area 75 Archives. You can contact your District 17 Archive Chair to arrange access to the recording. Is there anyone here with less than 30 days of sobriety? If you could raise your hand. All right. All right. Sorry, it's a little dark in here. Welcome. Is there anyone here with more than 15 years of sobriety? If you could please raise your hand. Welcome. Welcome. The speakers selected for this meeting are old-timers. An AA old-timer is any member who has been continuously sober for a significant period of time. The definition of significant is open to interpretation, but for the purpose of this meeting, an old-timer is anyone with 20 years or more of sobriety. The old-timers interviews serve as a representation of the significant impact that long-term sobriety can have on our AA community. And without further ado, I will introduce our speaker, Ray. Welcome.
Thank you.
All right. We've got some questions for you, Ray. What is your sobriety date?
July 11th of 1991.
All right, awesome. Who was the United States president when you joined AA?
I had to look this up. It was H.W. Bush.
All right. When and where was your first contact with AA?
My first meeting was at the Fireside Group on the north side off of 4 Mile Road. I think they met there at St. Andrew Lutheran Church. And the first gentleman I talked to, his name was Bob. I don't know what his last name was. But I was kind of reluctant to go in. I'd thought about going to that meeting for some time and then didn't. I'd been sober for about 5 months and was floundering. So I showed up one night right at the last minute, like 5 minutes to 8, hoping not too many people would try and talk to me, but he met me at the door and said, "Hi, my name is Bob. This is, we're having a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous here. Welcome." And told me about what they did, and that was my first experience on a Wednesday night.
All right. Can you describe what Alcoholics Anonymous was like back then compared to today?
I think Alcoholics Anonymous was the same as it is today. I think this community is quite different today than it was then. At least in my first 3 years of experience, I didn't much see anybody doing the big book, or there weren't many big book studies. There weren't 12 and 12 studies. Most of the meetings were, don't drink, go to meetings, tell their stories. It was mostly identification. Here's how I drank. Here's what it was like when I quit. Here's what it was like when I did drink. And that mystery that we could never find out how to break that cycle. And that's pretty much what I heard early on in the community when I first came in.
Okay. What were you like as a newcomer, and how do you think others would describe you as a newcomer?
Angry. Aloof. It's like the outside did not match the inside. Inside I was fearful, I was angry, I was restless, I didn't want to be here. I was extremely negative on the inside. But I showed up, I went to a lot of meetings. I tried to do what was told. You know, I went to a lot of meetings. I got involved in service. I was probably doing, you know, a meeting every day of the week. I ended up getting a sponsor. So I was doing the things that they were telling me to do and not drinking. But over those first, let's say, 3 years of sobriety, the longer I stayed off the sauce, so to speak, the more miserable I got. And I knew something was missing, and I had to find out what it was.
Okay. Who was your first sponsor, and how did you end up with them?
His name was Gary E. I asked him, and the first time I asked him, he said no. He said, "Well, we'll see how willing you are." And I'm like, "What? You know, WTF?" I'm like, so basically, it was their way of saying, "We're going to see if you're going to stick around and get some consistency and stick around AA and try to do this recovery." He finally come back to me and he said, "Sure, I'll sponsor you," and taught me what he was taught, which was mostly what he learned at DePaul, the treatment facility up in Milwaukee. And I did pretty much what he said, thinking that was Alcoholics Anonymous as I knew it. I did enough that the obsession to drink was finally removed. But even after that, there was still something missing, and I didn't know what it was. And I was searching for it, but not, let's say, overly zealously, you know. I was told, some of those old-timers that I met early on basically told me to stay away from those big book meetings. Stay away from those big book thumpers, as they called it, which eventually made me pretty curious about the big book. You know, long term, I ended up getting a relationship with a lady that's my wife now, but she got involved in a group in town here that worked right out of the books, and she started bringing home information to me about what she was learning, and being the good alcoholic that I was, I tried to steal it. Instead of doing it, I tried to steal it and make it part of my program, and that actually made me more miserable. Her sponsor, and the man that eventually became my sponsor, in their wisdom, knew that I wasn't real forthcoming with asking, so they kind of set me up. I was doing a newcomers meeting on Friday nights at the Benjamin House with Greg H., who was one of the founders of the Grove Club here. And we had been doing a regular Friday meeting for newcomers, and essentially it was treatment people, and one week you'd have, you know, a busload, and the next meeting you'd have the two of us. You never knew who was going to show up. Well, anyway, after one of those Friday meetings, my sponsor, Kurt S., new sponsor, showed up and said, "Hey, Ray, if you want to learn how to do this program of recovery, I'll be happy to teach you. But you got to decide by tomorrow morning. Give me a call, one way or the other, and decide what you want to do." And I obsessed about that offer all night, whether I should do it, whether I shouldn't do it. You know, I don't think I hardly slept. Well, I came around in the morning, I had my coffee, I picked up the phone about 9 o'clock, called him and said, "Hey, yeah, let's do it." He said, "Come on over." And we spent probably 2-3 hours talking about the first 3 steps. My life has been gone that route ever since. I've been in the books since then in every meeting that I go to. Totally changed my direction. And eventually all of that internal turmoil started to calm down. God started to do for me what I couldn't do for myself.
Okay. Who were the alcoholics that were prominent in your early sobriety?
Well, obviously Kurt. There's a couple other ones sitting here. Kim, John H., Kevin S., Sean P. He was the first one I heard that actually carry some of the stuff in the big book that in my first couple of years. He frequented the fireside group on occasion, and he planted a number of seeds in me that kept me thinking. Those were the early prominent ones. Rob B., Kathy B. Those are the ones that come to mind now, and that was from my earlier time, and when I first started actually working the program recovery.
Okay. Can you think of any AA catchphrases from back then that you don't hear anymore or as often, and what do they mean to you?
We used to do a meeting on slogans. Because most people back then, that was a big thing. Most of my early meetings, that's what you heard more than anything else was slogans. Don't drink, go to meetings, put the plug in the jug, kiss, keep it simple, stupid. Take the cotton out of your ears and stick it in your mouth. There was all kinds of stuff that they said. Good advice in a lot of cases, but the meaning behind them was pretty vague, at least it was for me. Some of those have direct reference in the big book, but you have to understand the big book to understand some of those phrases. So I've pretty much refrained from using them over the years, because they were, what's the word I want to use? Misleading. I put my meaning on them versus what they really referred to. I guess there was another one that was HALT. I used to, hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. I'm like, well, okay, what's that got to do with it? But it didn't make sense to me at the time. I don't use any of them anymore. I had to kind of dig back a little bit to remember some of that when I heard that was one of the questions.
All right. Did you get involved in service early on? And if so, what did you do?
Yes. I think I was a secretary first, which is, at the time, I'm sure I wasn't sure really what the job was, but what I ended up doing was opening the meeting place, setting up the tables, getting the ashtrays out, making the coffee, cleaning up afterwards. I was kind of the janitorial service, so to speak.
Okay.
Started the meeting, read the how it works. However that particular meeting was organized, their opening. I did that for a while. As soon as that was done, they made me their GSR, and I had no idea what that was about. But I got involved, and I got involved in the district for a while. I did that through one term with that group, and later on in years after that, I got involved again as a GSR. I was part of a PI committee, the CPC committee, did meeting lists. I did a number of things over the years. Speak occasionally, not one of my favorite things to do, but when you're asked, I say yes.
Okay. What kind of events or sober social activities were there when you got sober, and what were those like?
Well, contrary to most people, I never went to one dance. Really wasn't much of a clubber. If I went to a club, it was to go to a meeting. That was it. I seldom came here until maybe I was 10, 15 years sober. My early experience with the clubs was at the Alamo Club. And I think the only thing I did there was maybe the picnic. I very seldom did any of that stuff. Now, later on, I got involved. Our group would always do things. We would get together once a week, after the meetings, go out to dinner. Basically, it was fellowship and kind of retraining in some ways at how to live and how to get on, play nice with other people. Because that's, at least in my case, I didn't know how to play nice with other people. So there was that dynamic that went on. We did a number of those things. I've had yearly, there was early times where, I was maybe 10, 15 years sober, and we were part of the Work the Steps group, and I would have a number of the gentlemen that were interested in fishing go up to Canada with me. And basically it'd be an outing of all a group of AAs. It was kind of like a week-long meeting in a cabin in the woods. I did that for a number of years. That was fun. Now we pretty much do a annual get-together where we just invite our AA friends from the groups that we are active in. My wife and I are active in. So there's some folks from Milwaukee, from Oak Creek, from Racine, from Lakewood, Wisconsin, where we have I kind of split my time between here and there now that I'm retired.
All right. What was your first home group, and why did you decide to make it your home group?
I think my first home group was that Fireside group, and I think that was by default. That's where I started. Until I actually found a group that was what a group really is, a spiritual entity that was carrying the message of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that was the Work the Steps group. We had a number of different meetings. I still consider it that my home group, even though we don't necessarily have meetings anymore. We go to different meetings now. We've helped other people start meetings, help them become a group by sharing our experience, strength, and hope with how that happens and what that dynamic is like.
All right. Last question, then we'll go on break here. What do you remember most about the first time you sponsored someone?
I guess the first thing that comes to mind is I wanted his sobriety more than he did. Second thing was I didn't want to give any wrong information. I had been around for 3 years before I actually sponsored anybody that was I had anything really good to give them. So I had a number of folks that I carried an incomplete or a bad message to in those first 3 years. So I had to make up for that. I had to make amends for doing that. And I had to do it in the way that it's outlined in the program recovery. So I was trying to be real conscious of that and not make any mistakes, stick with the book, not go off the top of my head on just about anything. Check with my sponsor, make sure I'm doing it right. So I was real. I wanted to make sure that I did my best, especially not having known what I was doing, because I really have by my personality is I think I know everything anyway. So I had to really watch what I was doing. I had to throttle my personality to serve this purpose better than I could alone. I had to use the group and my sponsor to help me do that.
Alrighty. Well, thank you very much, Ray. We appreciate you answering the questions. We will go on a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back, and Ray will share his experience, strength, and hope from a passage from the Big Book. All right, we're going to welcome up Ray again, and he's going to spend the remainder of the meetings sharing his experience, strength, and hope on a passage from the Big Book. Welcome back, Ray.
Hi, everybody. Ray Barant, member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Again, my sobriety date is July 11th of 1991. Boy, I went back and listened to some of the other speakers that you guys have had, and most of what I chose was already, somebody had already grabbed, which is fine, that's good. So I started to look to see if I could find something that I didn't hear, because just about anywhere in the Big Book you can pull stuff out that's absolutely pertinent. So I'm going to go to page, and there is a solution, page 24. The fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against the first drink. The almost certain consequences that follow of taking even a glass of beer do not crowd into the mind to deter us. If these thoughts occur, they're hazy and readily supplanted with the old threadbare idea that this time I'll handle myself and be like other people. There's a complete failure of the kind of defense that one keeps from putting his hand on a hot stove. The alcoholic may say to himself in most casual way, "It won't burn me this time, so here's how." Or perhaps he doesn't think at all. How often have some of us begun to drink in a nonchalant way and after a third or fourth pounded on the bar and said to ourselves, "For God's sakes, how did I ever get started again?" Only to have that thought supplanted by, "Well, I'll stop at the sixth," or "What's the use anyhow?" When this sort of thinking is established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, he has probably placed himself beyond human aid. And unless locked up, may die or go permanently insane. These stark, ugly facts have been confirmed by legions of alcoholics throughout history. But for the grace of God, there would have been thousands more convincing demonstrations. So many who want to stop cannot. I spent a long time in that, years in that merry-go-round. There is a solution. Almost none of us like the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, the confession of our shortcomings, which the process requires for its successful consummation. But we saw that it really worked in others. We had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. I know. When therefore we were approached by those whom the problem had been solved, there was nothing left for us but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. We have found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into the fourth dimension of existence, of which we had not even dreamed. The great fact is just this, and nothing less, that we have had deep and effectual spiritual experiences, which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, towards God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish these things for us which we could never do by ourselves. If you are as seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there is no middle-of-the-road situation or solutions. We are in a position where life is becoming impossible, and if we pass through the region from which there is no return through human aid, we had but two alternatives. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation at best. The other was to accept spiritual help. This we did because we honestly wanted to and were willing to make an effort. This summarizes where I was when I came here. The first time I read this, I mean, it pretty much took me aback. It took my breath away. I wasn't I knew I was in the right place. I really didn't know what to do. I hadn't worked the program recovery, but I didn't want to live the way I was living anymore. And I was in that last sentence here. I was am I going to keep going to the bitter end, or am I going to ask for spiritual help? Second time I read this, I noticed there was a little appendix thing at the bottom here, a little asterisk. So I'm going to read that now. It's the appendix to the spiritual experience. Because, you know, we read, especially when we read Bill's story the first time, and actually, you know, when Bill told his story every time, first time, most people thought you had to have this white light, you know, spiritual experience and get struck sober. And fortunate for him, that's what happened. But that don't happen like that for most of us. So I was confused, you know. And I had spent a good portion of my life before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous trying a spiritual path to solve my problem through my religion at the time. And it didn't work. I would have short periods of sobriety and I'd be right back at it again, just like what I read earlier here. And I just stayed in that merry-go-round. I could never understand why I kept going back, because I could quit. You know, maybe I shouldn't use the word quit. I could stop. You know, and I had this attitude like, well, any fool can stop. I did it all the time. I couldn't stay stopped, and I never understood that. So I had reached that point where there was no other alternative but to either drink myself to death or find a new way. And that's what I got when I got here. When I finally got a new sponsor who decided that I decided to work the steps with him and do what he told me to do, I was on a path to, as it stated in part of this reading. You know, I didn't like the self-searching. You know, I didn't like doing my 4-step. You know, leveling of my pride. Hell, I didn't like that. I didn't like any of that. Question my shortcomings, my defects of character, my fears. I didn't like doing any of that. I fought it all the way, but I did it. You know, and as I did it, life started to change. I started to see things a little different. It didn't happen fast at first. And then the funniest thing for me early on was I was the last one to realize it. You know, my family would notice it. My significant other noticed it. People in my group noticed it. I'm like, really? I didn't notice it. I was too busy doing the shit or fighting about it or thinking about it. You know, I mean, I was just wrapped up in it. I didn't really understand the spiritual experience, you know. And page 183, the terms spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in the book. And upon careful reading, shows that a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism that manifests itself among us. So my personality needed to change. Well, actually, that's pretty obvious, but I didn't think it was until I read it. Yes, it's true that our first printing gave readers the impression of certain personality changes, and religious experiences must have sudden or spectacular upheavals. Even though they happen, that's an erroneous conclusion. In the first few chapters, a number of sudden revolutionary changes are described. Though it was not our intention to create such an impression, many alcoholics nonetheless concluded that in order to recover, they must obtain an immediate and overwhelming God consciousness, followed at once by a vastic change in feeling and outlook. That came pretty slow for me. I didn't get any flash of light. This happens, you know, like tomorrow. Among our rapidly growing membership and thousands of alcoholics, such transformations, though frequent, are by no means the rule. Most of us experience what the psychologist William James calls the educational variety. I'm like, well, what the hell is that? Someone in the library got the damn book. started reading it and started to learn what this really meant. That I'm the one that has to change. My inside has to change. And I need something outside of me to do that. So I needed a profound alteration in my reaction to life. And for those that knew me before, that was an obvious thing. So eventually got tapped into an inner resource that I presently identified as my own conception of a power greater than myself. And my first one was the group. They had something I wanted. My first group experience was, there was a power there that I didn't really know what it was, but there were people there that were doing the same thing. They were all together. It was, I never experienced that before anywhere. And it kind of made me nervous, but it also attracted me. And I knew it was something I needed, but I really wrestled with, am I going to do it? For a while. And I got down to the end of the last paragraph here, when I was wrestling with that, and it says, we find that no one need have difficulty with the spirituality program. Willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials to recovery. So those are the three things I had to have. I grabbed a hold of those three things. My willingness. What am I going to do today? What am I willing to do today for sobriety? Am I going to be honest with myself about who the hell I am? You know? And am I going to open my mind to some new ideas? Because my ideas were really bad, but I did not want to let go of them for a long time. Those were the essentials, but these are indispensable. And I was still fighting. I was still fighting with the idea of, you know, I'd go forward an inch and I'd go back an inch. And it's back and forth early in my experience with the group. And then this thing started to make some sense. This Herbert Spencer quote. There's a principle, which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation. And I spent my first 3+ years in AA as that person. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. To be without your old solution and not really have a new one is pretty miserable. When I finally found a Work the Steps group and started working the program of recovery, my life started to change and has been changing ever since. I've not only learned how to work it with my sponsor and with the group. Part of what we did there was, I remember probably, I don't know, maybe 2-3 months into my experience with the group, my sponsor coming in one night, we did a newcomers meeting, we did a big book meeting, we did a Work the Steps meeting, and we did a traditions meeting every week, different meetings. I come in one night and I had been in the newcomers meeting, obviously, because I was a newcomer. I'd been there for a few weeks, and my sponsor came in that night and he taps me on the shoulder and he says, by the way, you're facilitating the meeting tonight. And I'm like, holy shit. You know, and I haven't had to have a clue what I was doing. And then it just dawned on me that we had been doing it all along. I just happened to be standing in a different place. You know, went pretty well. So I was being continually asked to do more. You know, not just work the steps, but help somebody else. Eventually I started sponsoring people. And then, as I said in the interview, I was kind of nervous about that early on. And I had the opportunity over the years to sponsor quite a few people. That's even more rewarding than the first time I went through with my sponsor, and God removed all that stuff from me. You know, to watch somebody else. I mean, you got the thing up here on the wall. It's amazing to watch somebody else change, because I really didn't see me change early on. I was too busy. I do remember going to a group get-together, I think about, well, it's probably, might even 2 days, a day or two after I did my first fifth step with Kurt. And we were having a cookout, and there's all kinds of people from AA there, and I found myself sitting in a chair, one of these like folding chairs, sitting up against the wall and watching what's going on. And I found myself smiling. In fact, I was smiling so hard I was getting like muscle spasms in my cheek. And I'm like, I haven't smiled like this. I can't remember the last time I smiled like this. Really. I mean, so I started to experience some of those changes. Just simple stuff. You know, of course I'd mess it up the next day, you know, because I'm an asshole. But, you know, those things just started piling up. And the more God gave me, the more I wanted. Wasn't too long down the road where a group from Milwaukee who had some pretty down and out folks had some government-funded transportation, because they were either alcoholics or addicts, or, you know, these people were in a world of hurt, just like we were when we came in. And they were getting bussed around to different meetings. And they showed up on a Thursday night one night at our Work the Steps meeting, so right away we had a newcomers meeting. And I don't know, there was a couple of bus loads, so it was maybe 10, 15, maybe 20 people, you know, the short buses. And before the meeting, before the night was over, a couple of them asked for sponsors. Now we said, well, you know, we'll help you out. There's a few of us stepped up, and they came down pretty regular for a while, and eventually lost their funding, and said, hey, why don't you guys come to Milwaukee? They were from the south side, downtown Milwaukee, basically. And so some of us did. We did one meeting, one of the meetings with them, and it proved not to be very conducive to having a good meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. So we suggested that maybe they find another place, and we'll meet there. They ended up setting up a meeting up at the 12-Step Club up off of Townsend. We did that for a while, and we found that wasn't quite conducive for what we wanted to do. There was too many distractions at that particular club at the time, so they ended up finding a place to have a meeting over at St. Cat's Church on the north side in Milwaukee. And if there's probably 4 or 6 of us that were pretty much core that went every week. We all sponsored a number of different people, and after a while they kind of got a good core group of folks that got through the steps, and we started to kind of step back and let that group develop, just like it should. You know, let that spiritual entity start forming that group, and have them start their journey. And we kind of backed out. I've had that opportunity again here recently in Oak Creek. There's some people there that, hey, we like what you guys are saying. Would you teach, or would you start a meeting for us? I said, well, no, we won't start a meeting for you, but we'll help you. What do you want to do? So we got involved in that. This has really been rewarding. It's taken me places I never anticipated to go, never dreamed I would go, or wanted to go. It's given me a group of friends that hell, before I got here, I didn't have any friends. I mean, half my family didn't even care for me. You know, now I got a group, now I got friends. I got friends for life. Some of them I haven't seen very often, but, you know, if I see them once or twice a year, it's like I saw them yesterday. We're still connected. And this is what connected us. So, but for the grace of God, you know, it's like, who knows where I would have been if had I not run into you people and was at least open-minded enough to, okay, I'll try it, you know. I love this program, and I'll pass with that.